On May 4, 1932, 32-year-old Lilly Lindestrom was found dead inside of her apartment located in the Atlas neighborhood of Stockholm, Sweden. It was immediately apparent that Lily's death was no accident. Lilly was found face down on her bed. She was nude, and her clothing was neatly folded and placed on a chair next to the bed. There was evidence that Lilly had engaged in sexual activity prior to her death, as a condom was found inside of her. Strangely, a blood-stained ladle was found next to Lilly. But other than the blood-stained ladle, no other blood was found inside the apartment. Investigators had noted that the apartment was actually quite tidy for a crime scene. Although in today's standards, the crime scene would have been full of biological evidence. A post-mortem inspection of Lily's body was conducted. It was estimated that Lilly had been dead for 2 to 3 days based on the amount of decomposition on her body. Lily's cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. It was discovered that Lily's blood had also been drained from her body. Saliva had been found on Lily's neck and other body parts. It was believed that the killer had drained any blood in the body and drank the blood using the ladle. It was believed that Lily's killer had drained the body of any blood and used the ladle found next to Lilly to drink her blood. Strangely, investigators were unable to locate any entry points on Lily's body in which an instrument such as a needle could have been used to drain her of her blood. Investigators began to look into Lily's last days alive. They began by interviewing Minnie Jansen, who had reported Lilly missing. Minnie was Lily's friend and lived 1 floor below Lilly. Lilly and Minnie were both prostitutes. Minnie had seen Lilly alive on April 30th. Lilly went and paid rent to her apartment before asking Minnie for condoms because she was expecting a client. Lilly came back to Minnie's to ask for more condoms later on that night. Minnie remembered that Lilly was only wearing a coat, but Minnie would tell investigators that it was common for Minnie to answer the door to find a naked Lilly standing outside of her door. Minnie did not see Lilly the next day, but wasn't too concerned because she figured Lilly was out celebrating Walpurgis Night. Walpurgis Night was a holiday of sorts that was celebrated on May 1st and resembled a carnival-like atmosphere in celebration of spring. After Walpurgis Night, Minnie still had not had any contact with Lilly, which is when Minnie became concerned. After 2 days, Minnie contacted authorities about her missing friend. Investigators believe that Lily's killer was most likely a regular client of hers. There were several well-known cases in which prostitutes had been targeted, and these cases included those of Jack the Ripper. So investigators felt that whoever had killed Lilly was most likely somebody Lilly was well acquainted with. 9 men were questioned, but were released and cleared as suspects. Their names were never released, and records have since been lost or destroyed, making their identities lost forever. It was also unknown if investigators ran into too many suspects or lack of suspects due to the location of Lily's apartment. Lily's apartment was located in a neighborhood known as the St. Eriksplan, which was a hub of prostitution. The neighborhood was no stranger to violence and murders. One popular theory is that the killer was actually a police officer. A police officer would have knowledge of the strategies used in investigation of crimes. It is theorized that a police officer killer would have cleaned the apartment of any evidence that could have been incriminating and staged the crime scene to send the actual investigators down a rabbit hole. The other theory regarding the case was that the killer was a vampire. As mentioned earlier, Lily's body was drained of blood and a blood-stained ladle was found next to her body. There was also saliva found on Lily's neck. These facts led some to the conclusion that Lily's killer had to have been a vampire and was using supernatural powers to avoid detection for the crime. This theory is what led to the murderer being referred to as the Atlas vampire. Lilly's murder quickly went cold and no other suspects were ever identified. Although her murder is unsolved, the case is anything but forgotten. The lore of a vampire killer has kept the case from being lost to history. The Stockholm Police Museum has dedicated an exhibit to the infamous murder. Evidence taken from the crime scene, including nail clippings, hair samples, and condom wrappers, are on display. Since DNA was unknown at the time of Lilly's murder, the evidence taken was not properly preserved, making DNA analysis highly unlikely. But the legend of the Atlas vampire will continue to live on. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to hit the like button and subscribe for future videos.